visa for the US and my visa for the UK. So I took the standard IELTS, and later on last year, before I came to the UK, I had to take the UKVI as part of the requirement. And to tell you, like, I was really a bad speaker before when I was still reviewing, but eventually speaking is a skill. It's not IQ based. The only IQ based subtest in your IELTS is the reading. So if your IQ is really low, you will really have a hard time getting a 7 and up for the reading. But for speaking, writing, and listening, they are skill based. And just like nursing, as long as you practice every day, like 7 is not, it's not difficult to achieve. So that's a little motivation for you guys. So the criteria for speaking are the following. Oh, Sir Jeff is here already. Hello, sir. Sir, you can take over the floor first.
No, that's fine. Actually, got disconnected. So you can continue. Thank you so much.
Right. So like before we officially start, we'll just discuss a brief overview of the criteria of the speaking test. So the first one is fluency and coherence. So when you say fluency, can you speak continuously and in a natural way? And also, fluency includes complexity. It means that it's not only enough that you can speak continuously and naturally. You need to show the examiner that you also know comprehensive English, just not simple English. So later on, during the coaching session, like we're going to talk about the strengths and the weaknesses of the candidate, and you'll be able to learn strategies from me. When you say coherence, this is about the train of thoughts. So it's also not enough that you can speak continuously, but it must be organized. Hindi siya sabog. It does not go around the bush. And later on, I will teach you some strategies on how to speak with good train of thoughts. And also, coherence entails responsiveness. IELTS does not require you to answer the best, to give you the best, does not require you to give the best answers. This is not Miss Universe na, like, do you notice like the way candidates in Miss Universe answers the question? They're really good. Like the way they structure and they construct their ideas is really excellent. But IELTS speaking is about being responsive to the question. If you're asked of a question that you don't know, you can simply be honest and tell the examiner that you don't have an experience regarding that. Or like you can offer an alternative to the examiner. Like for example, you're asked about, tell me the best museum that you've been to, and in your entire life, you haven't been into a museum. So you can answer that by making up stories if you're really a good English speaker. But at the same time, you can be responsive to the question and be honest to the examiner and tell him that you haven't really been to a museum, but I have interest or I have hobbies when it comes to gardening. So would you like me to talk about different plants and different flowers that are very interesting to share? So you just need to be responsive. And you need to listen to the question. When you are asked, what is your favorite food and why? You need to answer two questions. You need to be responsive. You need to answer the first question, what's your favorite food? And you need to give explanation as to why. Because like most of us, sometimes we don't listen because of the pressure, and we tend to not be able to respond fully to the questions asked by the examiner during the actual exam. So next criteria is pronunciation and delivery. So you just need to focus on pronunciation. It means that you are not asked to have an accent like a British or an American accent or an Australian accent. When you see pronunciation, you need to deliver things clear. Delivery, you need to act or you need to converse in a very natural way, not in a formal way. Because like most of us, we tend to be very formal. We tend like sometimes not to show facial expressions, but delivery is one of the criteria which wherein the speaker wants to see that we're just like conversing with a friend. So you don't need to be formal. The third criteria is vocabulary. Some people fail the speaking exam because their vocabulary is too simple, and they tend to repeat vocabs during their speaking exam. So instead of using simple words such as good, beautiful, or pretty, we need to think of other vocabs. And the last criteria for the speaking exam is grammar. This is also one of the problems of us Filipinos because of pressure and stress of the exam. Sometimes we just speak continuously, but we forget the correct grammar, like the use of is and are, for example, or the use of who, which, where. So I've heard a while ago during the speaking exam, the examiner did really great actually, but I just heard some grammar problems. So vocabulary and grammar are local criteria of the IELTS. Pag sinabi mong local criteria, they cannot really affect your score badly. Because I mean, like, vocabulary and grammar can be easily learned. But if you have problem with the two other criteria, fluency, coherence, pronunciation, and delivery, they are like global errors or they are global sins in the speaking exam. Because if you have problem with coherence, your train of thoughts are not that good. When you speak to someone, it goes around the bush, it's very scattered, then no one will understand you, and eventually your speaking exam will really be a disaster. So those are the 4 criteria of your speaking exam that later on, during the feedback time, we will try to give suggestions on how to improve them, and you will later on see what are the weaknesses of each candidate that you can learn from. Right. Sir Jeff, are you there already?
I'm here. Yes, you want to start now? Hello, I cannot hear you, Ma. Okay, I will ask you to unmute. Sorry, Eric. You're muted, Eric. Can you hear me?
Here you
Okay,
go.
sorry, yeah. So do you want to start now? Are you ready, guys? Okay, so please raise your hand if you want to be the first candidate. So don't be shy. Okay, good. There's one. Go, Leslie. Okay.
Leslie, hold on. I'm
Hi,
trying
sir.
to find Leslie because I'm using my phone.
Neighbors.
So make sure, Leslie, you have your camera on.
Yeah, because eye
Sorry.
contact is very important in speaking. So I just wanted to see if the examiner has eye contact, and anyway, it can be improved in the long run. Leslie, oh God, there's lots of members joining, and I'm using my phone, so I had to swipe. I'm trying to find Leslie. Hold on. Leslie. So guys, I'm not an IELTS expert. Actually, I just saw Sir Jeff posted in Lifora, and I'm a USRN myself, so I've been in that group for quite a while. But I just went here to the UK because also the process of my visa application is not also doing well for the United States. And when I saw Sir Jeff posted, like, I just wanted to help, so I messaged him if I can, since I mean, like, workload here, the schedule here in the UK is not that hectic. Leslie. I can find Leslie, hold on. Okay. Leslie, can you turn on your camera? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Hello, Leslie.
Hi, good afternoon.
Where are you located right now?
Saudi Arabia, Jeddah.
Oh, Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. And how's been your day today?
Quite good. I'm just practicing listening and reading this morning.
All right, lovely. You know what? It's very cold already here in London, and it's just summertime. So, like, how's been the weather there so far?
Unfortunately, all these years and every time it's like humid and it's still hot. There's no changes here.
Okay. And I presume that you're a nurse.
Yes, sir.
And what is your specialization?
I'm currently working in a general ward nurse. As a general ward nurse. Yes.
Lovely. And can you tell me your typical day at work?
Well, upon working, when I arrive on my hospital at 7 o'clock in the morning, we usually do our rounds and endorsement, of course, for about 1 hour. Then after that, we do prepare our medications and give the medications to our patients. But that will be a morning shift. But when I am in a night shift, of course, we will do bed bathing for those patients. And usually we consume 5 to 6 hours of our duty for just doing batting to our patients. And after that, for the remaining hours, we'll just do the documentation.
All right, lovely. So I started by starting a conversation with Leslie because I wanted to gauge Leslie's speaking ability before we formally start the mock exam part 1 to part 3. Yeah?
Yeah.
So just to give Leslie a few feedback before we proceed, if you notice, Leslie, in terms of fluency and coherence, in terms of fluency, um, she can speak continuously and it's very natural, isn't it? Right? And in terms of coherence, her train of thoughts is not scattered. I asked him about her typical day of work and she gave me a flow. It does not jump from one thing to another. It's good. And she was responsive to the question. Because before, when I tried to ask an examinee about this typical day at work, she started speaking by telling me when she wakes up in the morning, she would prepare, she would sort out her kids, blah blah blah, and after work she would do this and that. The examiner was only asking Leslie about typical day at work, and Leslie responded to the question, no more, no less. And that's very important in the IELTS exam. So you really need to listen to what is being asked because speaking basically is a process, isn't it? Communication is a process. There needs to be a feedback. And the feedback must be proper or right. And in terms of Leslie's pronunciation, Leslie has the typical Filipino accent and it's good. There's nothing wrong with it. In terms of delivery, it was clear. And in terms of vocabulary, it's not that superb, it's not that complex, and maybe Leslie just needs to maybe work on her vocabulary. But anyway, as long as you do it in fluency, coherence, pronunciation, and delivery, you'll do well for me. Okay, now Leslie, are you ready to start the speaking exam?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Can you please start by stating your complete name?
Okay. My name is Leslie Ann Agtarap.
All right. And how would you like me to call you?
You can call me Leslie for short, and it's fine for me.
All right. Let's start now. Leslie, tell me how you got your name.
Well, I don't have much information on how my parents gave me this name, but I guess it was from an artist that they love during their times. We have this local Filipino artist named Leslie, and during that time, my mom told me that she is very famous and really talented, and they consider her as a multimedia actress. So I think that is where my name came from.
Okay, that's lovely. Now, Leslie, can you describe your hometown to me?
Well, I was born and raised in the Philippines, specifically in the northern part. My province is in Isabela. It is approximately 6 to 10 hours drive from the city center, which is the Manila. And my hometown composed of more on agricultural land, wherein most people are getting their getting their finances from. And the total population in my countries, when I was not mistaken, I think it's about 50,000 to 80,000.
All right, that's lovely. Leslie, if ever I'm going to visit your hometown, Isabela, is that correct? What delicacy would you like me to taste? And why?
Well, of course, Isabela offers a lot of delicacies, especially the what we call bibingka, and it is a local rice made from by steaming it and added sugar in it. And aside from that, I would like also to offer you this pinakbet in our vernacular language. It is a combination of different types of vegetables such as squash and even strings. And this cuisine is very palatable for me and amazingly delicious.
All right. Now, my next question is, Leslie, can you describe to me a famous body of water in your hometown?
Well, Isabela, just like what I have said, is more on residential and agricultural area, but we have this one location in the northern part which has a beach, and most of it are owned by the government, so it is free for the public. It offers a really crystal clear white sand beach, and there's a lot of marine mammals that we can see there, and they showcase a lot of fishes as well as coral reefs that we can do that we can see whenever we do different water sports activities.
All right, lovely. Now, Leslie, if given the chance to change profession, would you? Why or why not?
Well, that's a very difficult question for me, but I think if given a chance, I would want to be a supermodel because that is my really ambition. When I was still in my childhood years, I was influenced by a lot of supermodels that I watch in the television. Even though my height doesn't guarantee me to be a supermodel, if given only a chance, why not change my profession, I guess.
Okay, lovely. Now, Leslie, are you happy to proceed with part 2 of the speaking test?
Yes, I am.
Now, Sir Jeff will try to flash the question for part 2, okay?
Okay.
And I'll be giving you 1 minute, okay, to read it and formulate your answer. And you'll be given 2 minutes to speak about your answer. Leslie, after 1 minute, the flash will disappear, as in the actual IELTS, the examiner is going to take the cue card. Are you now ready for 1 minute?
Okay, sir.
Okay, your 1 minute starts now. All right, 1 minute is up.
Okay.
Okay, so the flash was removed already.
Okay.
Now, okay, now Leslie, your 2 minutes starts now.
Okay. To be honest, I'm not a bookish person, and reading is not my cup of tea. However, way back when I was still in my college years, I really enjoyed reading this book. This is a book entitled Fundamentals of Nursing. It is authored by Nightingale, and of course, Nightingale is considered as one of the leaders in the field of nursing. So I chose this book basically because learning fundamentals is tangential in our curriculum in nursing when I was still studying. So I got to be interested with this because there's a lot of diseases and there's a lot of diseases that I can learn with this, such as which is related to the body system of an individual. And I enjoyed reading this because during that time I was with my close friends, and we really, whenever we hang out, we really read this book to broaden our knowledge in terms of the different illnesses that we can encounter as we go on to the as we pursue this profession. So during that time, I was really amazed and really mesmerized as well with the different pictures and the different articles that I got to read with that book. And this was also the time that, this is the only book that I really enjoyed during my whole year in nursing. So if given a chance to read it again, I guess I would do it, because I can see that I will do more with this
All right,
book.
my lovely. Thank you so much. Your 2 minutes ends now. You did really well now. Let's proceed to part three of the speaking test. So, guys, usually in part three of the speaking test, they are more complex questions than part one. But even though they are more complex, they are usually related to part two of the test. Yeah. So since you were talking about, for example, we're talking about books. In part three, you could be asked of things related to books like literature or whatsoever related to books. So somehow in part two, you'll already have an overview of what would part three will give you. So are you happy to proceed with part three?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Leslie, what do you think are the advantages and disadvantages of having online books?
Well, for me, the benefit of having an online book is the accessibility of it. Wherever and whenever you go, you can read it as much as you can. And of course, there's a lot of articles that you can have, you can read there. You can update different kinds of information when you are in an online book. However, the drawback is that it can cause diseases such as uh, illness in the eyes, because as we all know, reading books through cell phone could cause eyesore. So I guess that's one of the drawbacks of reading online books.
All right, lovely. Okay, now Leslie, can you talk about an article which made you really mad recently?
Well, I can think of one article that I've read, because I'm not really into reading articles as of the moment. But I think 1 month ago, I read this news, or I heard this news about the current situation in the Philippines, which is about the corruption in the field health. So I was really disgusted and disappointed with the public officials that serves the country, because they are involved in the corruption with the funds that should be given to the Filipino citizens, but they was take the fund was taken away by public officials and were used with their own benefits.
Okay, lovely. Now, Leslie, my next question is, um, which do you prefer? Do you prefer reading academic books or entertaining magazines, and why?
For me, I would prefer to read entertaining magazines. It's because reading academic books for me uh, is boring, and I don't really have interest with that. Whereas if I am reading magazine, I got to be entertained, and I can say that it is a stress reliever for me.
Okay, lovely. Leslie, thank you so much. Your speaking test ends now. You did really great. Are you excited for the feedback?
Yeah. I can think of any book with the part two, because I don't really read books.
I mean, like, it's good to invent something, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I hope so in the future.
right. Okay. Sir Jeff, are you there? Okay. Let's start the feedback, yeah?
Yes, yep.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, in part one, I asked you to describe, actually, you really did good in the part one. You did also good in part two. Okay. I'll give a score later. So, in part one, I asked you the question about distance. I asked you a question about describing your hometown, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So just to inform everyone, in part one, you are asked, you all know that already, you are asked of basic questions and personal questions. But mostly, what have you noticed about the questions that I've been asking Leslie in part one? They are questions that challenge candidate to describe things. because most questions that will come out in part 1 will really look at if you're good at describing things. That's why I kept on asking, describe to me about your hometown, describe about a body of water, describe this, what delicacy would you like me to offer when you go to your country, because that is where most candidates fail in part 1, because they're not good at describing things. For Leslie, she did great in terms of clarity and fluency. She speaks continuously. Maybe my suggestion in Leslie's part 1 would be more of the content. Again, IELTS speaking is not about giving the best answer, but Leslie's answer to part 1, for example, I asked her about her hometown, was too safe and not really that interesting. So like the examiner will think, her answers are a bit safe because like you talked about the distance, that your hometown is 2 hours far from the city center, blah, blah, blah. The population is blah, blah, blah. I think that's too safe. And the examiner might think, oh, her answering is too safe and I cannot really gauge her ability to speak complexly or comprehensively. So would I give this candidate a 7? You got my point?
Yes, sir. It's
So
too common.
I asked you to describe your hometown. It's not really talking about population is common, but I think it's really safe because anyone can just say, oh, the population in my hometown is this.
Yeah.
So, like, if I'm the examiner, I cannot really gauge your ability to speak. Yeah? So,
Yes,
when
sir.
you're asked to describe something, you need to think of adjectives. Okay? Next, you were asked with the second question, if I will visit your hometown, what delicacy would you like me to taste? You actually gave 2 answers, pinakbet and bibingka.
Yeah.
What's good with you is that the way you pronounce pinakbet and bibingka are very clear. Guys, if you are speaking of something that is local, or if you're speaking of a proper name, like kahit magsasabi lang kayo Lady Gaga, okay, Lady Gaga is famous, Shawn Mendes is famous, but it's still considered as a proper name. You need to follow Leslie. You need to speak very clearly when you mention something local or when you mention a proper name. Because this is a problem with most candidates. When they're asked of something specific and they say bibingka, pinakbet, sometimes it's not that clear and you need to take note that no one will understand you if you will not enunciate it very clearly. And that's what good with Leslie a while ago. But actually, Leslie just gave herself a hard time. She should have focused on one because she was just asked by the examiner, if I will go to your hometown, what delicacy would you like me to taste? So yung naging problema kay Leslie sa question na to, she gave 2. However, her description of the delicacy and her explanation as to why I need to taste this delicacy is kind of lacking. I felt that Leslie was kind of intimidated with the question. It's really hard to describe food, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yung ginawa ni Leslie, I'm trying to read minds. Yung ginawa ni Leslie, nagbigay siya ng 2 just to survive the question.
Yeah. To lengthen the information.
Yeah. What could have been done is she just focus on one, describe the delicacy. So like for example, I'd like you to taste pinakbet. It's actually a vegetable cuisine or a vegetable dish that is very famous in my hometown. And it is composed of a variety of vegetables local in my hometown. You're describing already. Vegetables such as squash or pumpkin, okay, eggplant, and other local green vegetables. Okay, and it is garnished with blah, 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 blah. And I would really like you to savor this delicacy of ours because, and then you give an explanation as to why. But I know, I felt that you were intimidated. I saw it in your eyes. That's why you thought of giving 2 answers. But actually, your criteria for, what you call this, coherence as well as fluency was affected. Kasi parang wala masyadong nakuhang information yung examiner from you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Don't get offended, ha?
No, it's okay.
Okay. Right. Next, I asked you about the famous, to describe a famous body of water in your hometown. I felt that you tried to give an introductory statement that, as I've mentioned, blah, 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 my hometown is more rich of land resources or agricultural resources. but I would like to share to you this famous beach. You said like that.
Yes.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but there's no sense of making an introduction, which you said a while ago, when you have an answer to it. Because in speaking tests, as much as possible, the examiner wants to gauge your speaking ability to respond to the question. So if you will make introductions that are not really that rational, the examiner again will think that you're being safe, and actually you cannot express comprehensively, and he or she might not give you a 7. So the technique there, if you really don't know the answer, if you really don't have an answer to the question, say it directly. Mr. Examiner, to be honest, I haven't been really, or Mr. Examiner, to be honest, there's really no famous body of water in my hometown. But as I've mentioned, since we depend more on land resources, is it okay if I'm going to share with you a famous land destination in Isabela? And that is, yeah?
Yeah. Because
So,
actually, in the first part, I haven't think of any beach or
yeah,
sea.
I
Then,
understand.
as I am talking, that's why I switch my
Yeah.
topic.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. So always answer directly. If you don't have an answer, tell the examiner, express in a very eloquent way to the examiner that you don't have something in mind, blah, 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 and offer an alternative. Yung technique na offering an alternative, it will give you an advantage because you will be speaking of something that you know, of something that you have experience in, and it will draw lots of ideas. Okay. Now, when I asked Leslie about a body of water, she said an introduction, and eventually she said that there's a body of water. However, also I find the description lacking. You just mentioned about it's clear, it has lots of marine animals, it has coral reefs, it is very good for water sports. Yeah. You answered the question of you're asked to describe the body of water, but you lack expounding. Medyo nagkulang ka sa pag-expound. What about the marine mammals? What about the clarity of the water? What about the coral reefs? So, eto guys yung technique. Kapag tinatanong kayo ng mga enumerative questions, kasi most questions in the IELTS are enumerative. Pag sinabi mong enumerative, you're asked to describe, you're asked of advantages and disadvantages. On your first sentence, answer the question first directly. Like, for example, you're asked, describe a body of water in your hometown. I would like answer first directly using the first sentence. I would like to share a very exquisite beach in my hometown. Simple as that, you answer the question directly. And then, think of 3 words that will serve as your guide words to further answer the question, which is to describe that beach, to further expound the question. So for example, Ma'am Leslie, I'm going to ask you again, can you give me 3 adjectives or 3 words that will serve as your guide in order to explain your answer or to describe that beach that you're talking about? So give me the first word or first phrase, for example.
The white sand beach.
Okay, white sand.
The white sand, yeah.
White sand.
And
Second.
the crystal clear water.
Crystal clear water. Lovely. Third.
And coral reefs that we can see underneath the water.
Coral reefs. So if those are your guide questions, you can answer the question like this. I would like to share to you a very exquisite body of water in my hometown. It's actually a virgin beach, and there are very few tourists going in there. This beach is described as a tourist spot with first. You can say like that. Second, third. So pag sinabi mong first, sabihin mo yung first mo na explanation as to why and expound. And then jump on the next descriptor or on the next guide and explain further. And then jump on the last descriptor and explain further. Para yung train of thought mo is very organized.
Yeah.
Another technique is, in order to have good train of thoughts, actually, Ma'am Leslie, you don't have problem with train of thoughts. Your problem is more of the content of what you're saying, which will affect your fluency. Okay? But in terms of clarity and in terms of train of thoughts, you're doing really well. So like there's a big possibility that you will get a 7. You just need to practice. Okay. Another technique for train of thoughts, to have good train of thoughts, is when you're asked a question, answer first the question directly, and that will be your first sentence. For the second sentence, you think of a keyword. You think of a keyword in the first sentence that will help you formulate your second sentence. For the third sentence, you think of a keyword in the second sentence that will help you formulate your third sentence, and so on and so forth. Because I've noticed most Filipino examinees, when they try to speak, it tends to be very scattered. They tend to jump from one topic to another. Yeah. And actually, a while ago, before this session, I heard a examiner who just finished a test. Her train of thought is really good because the content of her first sentence, it's found in the second sentence. The content of her second sentence, it's found in the third sentence, and so on and so forth. And hindi mawawala yung examiner if you do it that way. Like, for example, you're asked about describe your family. So you answer the question directly first. Well, my family is a nuclear type of family. Think of a keyword in the first sentence that will help you formulate your second sentence. Nuclear. I said that it's a nuclear family because I only live with my parents and my siblings. And most of my other extended family members live far from us. You think of another keyword in the second sentence to help you formulate your third sentence. For example, the keyword that you chose in the second sentence is extended family. You talk about extended family in the third sentence. As I mentioned, since my other extended family members live far away from us, it's kind of lonely sometimes, and during family gatherings, it's really hard to be together and to make memories that we can reminisce for a lifetime. So basically, you're just establishing a train of thoughts using the technique. So that's another suggestion from me, like to everyone who will be undergoing their speaking test. Okay, now, my last question for the speaking test part 1 is, when I ask you if you wanted to change profession, why or why not? It's good that you answer the question directly, pero yung naging problem mo dito is yung pag-expound. Again, more on content and fluency. You just mentioned that you wanted to be a supermodel because of your height, you're tall, blah, blah, blah. But I really did not grasp other contents or other ideas that could be interesting for the conversation. And again, it will affect your fluency. The examiner will think that I'm not sure if her speaking ability would get a 7. What would the speaking examiner would think of. Right? But overall, actually, you did great. Just practice on fluency or the content of what you will be talking about.
Yes.
Now, in your speaking test part 2, this is really good. This is your best performance. Your best performance are the first question in the speaking test part 1 and the speaking test part 2, because you're very clear, you're very responsive to the questions for speaking test part 2, your train of thoughts are excellent for speaking test part 2. May nakalimutan ka lang questions na sagutin in speaking test part 2. You did not answer you didn't answer the question. Wait lang, hold on, sorry. What is the what book, what made you decide to read this? What made you think after reading? Okay, actually you answered the question, but there was no identifier that you're already answering the question. What you did was, you answered the first question. You said you read Fundamentals of Nursing. You answered the second question, why you decided to read it, because it's tangential and you can learn lots of diseases that are essential in your nursing career as a student nurse. And you answered the fourth question, explain why you enjoy it, because it broadened your knowledge. It made you enjoy time with your friends, blah, blah, blah. And you answered the third question last. So, kumbaga, if the examiner is already too tired to think, okay, of listening to you, baka hindi niya ma-grasp na nasagot niya pala yung question.
Yeah.
That's why identifiers are very good to be used in answering speaking test part 2. What do I mean by identifiers? Like for example, if you're asked about what made you decide to read this, you need to mention it in the sentence na I decided to read this book because. Or
Yes,
those
yes.
are the identifiers. It serves
Yeah.
as the guide for the examiner that actually you are responding to the 5 questions being asked in the cue card. Or like for example, you are asked in the 3rd questions, what made you think after reading this book? You can state a short identifier that after reading this book, I felt really amazed because of blah 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 blah.
Yes.
So it will add to your score in the train of thoughts or in the coherence. And it will also be easier for the examiner to follow your thoughts that actually you have answered all the questions.
Sir,
But actually,
regarding for the sub questions, is it advisable to follow it, or you can just rumble the questions by when you are answering?
you can rumble the question. However, for me, it would be easier for you and for the examiner if you give identifiers. Because for me, like if I'm the examiner, I cater to like lots of people already. And what if you will be the last person to be catered? My mind is so tight already that maybe I cannot grasp what you're talking about. But if you have identifiers on the questions that you're answering, then it will help the examiner and it will give you more chance to get a 7.0 in terms of the train of thoughts. Kasi baka ma-misinterpret ng examiner na may question ka na hindi nasagot. So just to share to everyone, what I do with speaking test part 2 is I make a Johari window.
Yes.
And then from the Johari window, I make guide words. Because eventually, after the 1 minute, the cue card question will be taken away from you. So like for example, yung question dito, describe a book that you love reading. Yun yung hindi mo na-answer pala na question. Yun yung dapat na naging introduction mo. Kasi I'm listing your answers. So, describe a book that you love reading. It asks you to describe. So, give me 2 or 3 descriptors that will guide your answer about the fundamentals of nursing. Example, interesting. So, isulat mo lang dyan sa papel mo, interesting. Number 2.
Okay.
Number 2, for example, interesting, academic, very academic. And then you start on talking about interesting and academic. What's interesting and what's academic about fundamentals of nursing? Next, sa Johari window mo na. Ang first question dyan is, what is the book that you have read that you want to share about? So lagay mo lang dyan, funda. So when you make a guide using that Johari window that I'm talking about, since you only have 1 minute to do it, okay, and to think of your answers, place 1 word or 1 phrase as much as possible. And then second Johari window, what made you decide to read it? So pag tinanong ka ng what, isa lang dapat yung sagot mo. Pero pag tinanong ka what are the reasons that you decided to read it, at least have 2 answers. So what made you decide? So yung sinabi mo dito, tangential. Tangential naman talaga siya kasi magagamit mo talaga as a nursing student, as a nurse. So lagay mo lang yung word na tangential. Next, what made you think after reading this? Amazed. Kasi isa na naman yung tinatanong niya and then you just have to expound. And fourth one, explain why you enjoyed reading it. So, broadened knowledge, sabi mo. So if you have those guide words with you, like you will really do great in your part 2 of the exam. Actually, you did great in the part 2. May isang question lang talaga na hindi ka nasagot, and that is the first one. Describe the book.
Yes.
Yeah, lovely. Now, for your part 3, I asked you advantages and disadvantages of online books, right? So you only gave 1 advantage and 1 disadvantage. Actually, your answer was really great. I really like your answer. But if you could have at least gave 2 for advantage and 2 for disadvantage.
Yeah. Okay.
Kasi it's part of the fluency eh. The reason why there are questions such as advantages and disadvantages, because actually, the examiner wants to look at or gauge your fluency, which is the number 1 criteria. Next, I asked you about what do you call this? To talk about an article which made you mad recently. And what's good with you is you answered it directly na wala ka talagang nabasa na article recently that made you mad. Pero a month ago, you watched something from the tele and you talked about
Yes.
it. Siguro nakulangan lang ako sa pag-expound kasi yung question na to, it asks you to narrate. There are questions that are called narrative questions. Pag tinanong kita, talk about an article or a written article which made you really mad, I'm asking you to narrate. And medyo nakulangan lang ako sa pag-narrate mo that you just talked about corruption in the PhilHealth and you didn't even explain what PhilHealth is. You just said that it's a branch of the government and the officers in that branch of the government corrupted money, blah, blah, blah. So actually, ma'am, you don't have problem with clarity. You don't have problem with train of thoughts. What will work on with you is the fluency or the content that you're talking about.
Yes, sir.
In terms of vocabulary, we will improve in vocabulary because most of the words that you've been using were simple words. And grammar, you don't have problem with the grammar. Diba? So, yun.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much. I hope you
Thank
learned
you.
something.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Leslie, do you have any question for Erik? Leslie, do you have questions?
None so far, sir.
Okay, thank you so much.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Our next candidate will be Christina.